Hello, hello, I am live. Welcome back, everybody. My name is June Allen, your racial sobriety mentor, and from juneallen.net. And I teach people how to free themselves from addiction to self-hate through personal empowerment and 12-step recovery. So today, I'm answering a question from a lovely sister who sent me a message. She wanted to know how can she heal when the trauma is ongoing? And great question, really great question. So that's the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Now, before I kind of get into the content and get into the details, I'm just going to share this broadcast with my page and with my group. So just bear with me and give me a moment. I hope that you're having a good day today. Once again, the weather in London is amazing. Hi, somebody's just joined. Hello. Drop your name in the comments and let me know where you're joining me from. I keep doing that. I've got to stop doing that. Okay, so let me share this. Share to my news feed. Excuse me. Okay, so then I'm just going to share to my group and then we're all set. We are all set. Let me just see here. Okay, sharing group. There we go. Oh, I'm sharing in the wrong group. Sharing in the wrong group. Ah, here's the one I'm looking for. Okay, so I'm sharing in there. Right, okay, so for those of you that have just joined, my name is June Allen from juneallen.net, and I teach people how to heal from the impact of racism through personal empowerment and 12-step recovery. So topic today is, again, like I was saying before, is a sister wanted to find out how can we heal, how can Black people heal from racism when it's all ongoing. Now also this series that I'm doing is inspired by my free ebook called 7 Steps to Unlock Your Sister Superpowers. You can actually get the ebook at superpowers.juneallen.net. And the book is all about how to reconnect with your own natural superpowers. I talk about courage, I talk about self-compassion, I talk about sobriety, which is what inspired this series of broadcasts. Gosh, what else do I talk about? I talk about culture, I talk about femininity, so many different things, and how important it is to reconnect with those things that are already your birthright, that are already part of who you are. And, because we get busy, we get stuck doing other things, and, we forget that we have these superpowers inside us to help us get through things like trauma, but we just neglect them. We forget that they're there. So the book is there to remind you of how amazing you are, and how these things that we forget are going to help us to reclaim ourselves and bring us back home to ourselves. So if you know anyone that might be interested in this broadcast, that you think that they might find it useful, you can share it with a friend. Sharing is caring and all that. Right, so let's jump into the content. I've got my notes. I'm very organized today. I've got my notes. So yeah, so the challenge with this question is that, racism, white supremacy is ongoing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It does not stop. So it makes sense with this question, like, how on earth are we supposed to heal when we're constantly being oppressed? Every day that, every day that I go on social media, there probably isn't a day that goes past that I don't see some sort of trigger, around racism. And actually, it's not just about racial trauma. It's not just about racial stress. It's also about stuff that might be going on inside our families, because obviously racism gets internalized. So, if families are in pain around this stuff and it's not been healed, then this is gonna play itself out within families. So it might not just be the external stuff. The external issue is racism, white supremacy in the various areas of people activity, be it media or politics. I'll go for the 90s: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and more. If it's not, that's the external part of it. But the internal part is obviously how we feel about ourselves, how we communicate with each other as a result of how we feel about our blackness. So that internalized trauma within the family is also going to create pain for us. It's going to create pain. So it's important to not just think about the external stuff, but think about the internal stuff as well. And this is where we need to start. So the stress is ongoing. The stress is ongoing. If you've got stuff that's going on in your family, and like I was saying before about the stuff on social media, it doesn't stop. So, it's important for us to understand how this stuff impacts us. Now, racial stress is something that it can be, really obvious. It can be obvious stuff like, seeing a video of somebody getting beaten up, a black person getting physically abused or whatever on social media. That is an overt way that we can experience racial stress. A more subtle way that we might experience racial stress is, let me think of an example. Through imagery, and in magazines as well. Magazines, I remember reading an article saying that, if you read just a general magazine, and you see more, white women or whatever than black women, if you look at that, and that becomes your, that almost becomes your idea of beauty. That's your idea of beauty. So that can cause like an unconscious stress about being who you are. Because if you're constantly seeing white imagery everywhere, and you're constantly seeing black people, as oppressive, low, less than, all of that kind of stuff, then it's going to cause it's going to cause a low level stress. That's kind of like microaggression. That's an example of microaggression. So, it's passive and it's aggressive as well. So that is going to cause stress if you're constantly experiencing it, and we experience it at both levels. That's going to cause stress. So some of the symptoms that we might experience as a result of racial stress might be things like social anxiety, isolation, anger, black shame, and depression. These are all things that I hear so many people talk about when it comes to racial stress, and quite often, sometimes, it can be hard to identify. It can be really hard to identify within ourselves what is a reaction to racism and what isn't. And quite often, especially in the UK, I've heard people say, oh, it's not as bad in the UK. So no one's going to walk up to you and call you the N-word or whatever. Or you don't see people on, as much in the UK being as, actually they do get harassed in the UK. Actually, I'll take that back, especially in London. But it might not be as, as brutal as it is, say, in the States. So people think, oh, it's okay. But I think the difference in the UK is that it's just more hidden. It's more subtle. It's more passive. It's a lot more passive, and it makes it harder to detect. You find yourself questioning, is that person behaving that way? Is it me, or is it because racist, or am I being paranoid? So it's a lot harder to detect in the UK. But because, we live under the system of racism where whiteness is kind of like the dominant position, that can create social anxiety, and it can make you feel, can make us feel isolated in our own black skin. The way that white supremacy operates, it's almost like we become prisoners in our black skin, because we can't get out of it. So, the depression and feeling powerless over the systems and stuff like that, it's very hard. It becomes very, very hard to be able to manage the racial stress, because it's constant all the time from different places. So it is hard to kind of, pinpoint our feelings and, and kind of understand, is this a response to racism or not? Because it is so subtle, and also because it goes over, it goes over a long period of time as well. It's that thing of, well, is it ancestral? Is it current, something I'm going through now? Is it social? There's so many different things. There's so many different things and different ways that we internalize racism that quite often that's really hard to pinpoint where it's coming from. So yeah, and it's hard because sometimes we don't, unless we've got like a safe place to be able to start to unpick a lot of this stuff, you know, we're not going to know how much we're hurting. Or I put up a post yesterday on Facebook and it really resonated with so many people. I read it. I put, you know, sometimes we don't know how much we're hurting until we find a safe place to feel, until we really start to understand what's happening to us, how, you know, how we've internalized a lot of this stuff. We're not going to know how much pain we're in or where it comes from, so we can actually start to take action on where we need to kind of plug the gaps to start to take care of ourselves. So what I've done for you is I've come up with 3 different things that you can do to actually start to begin the process to start to take care of yourself, you know, even amongst all the racial stress, the trauma, the chaos that's going on. I mean, obviously it's not a quick fix, you know, because racism, white supremacy is still active and aggressive and doing what it has to do. And it's something that you have to commit to over time. It's a lifetime commitment. As far as I'm concerned, it's a commitment that you have to do every single day, you know. And the first thing that I always say to people, you know, you have to find a space to get quiet. You have to find a place to get quiet. And this is the first superpower that I put in the book, superpowers.gianallen.net. The first thing that you have to learn how to do is to learn how to be quiet, to underschedule, to find a safe place so you can begin to think. If you don't have a safe place to think, you ain't going to be able to feel. And if you can't feel anything, you can't change anything. It's that simple. You have got to commit to, even if it's 30 minutes a day, excuse me, you've got to commit to finding some solitude, because you know, as I say in the book, the solitude is where the truth is. You can't hide from the truth of what's going on for you when you're in solitude. When you're in solitude, there's no distractions. There's nobody chattering in your head. You're not having to deal with, you know, images of you know, white supremacy saying how fantastic whiteness is. It's just you and your higher self, you and God, basically, in that space. And that is where you're going to be able to, number one, honor your humanity, because you're able to think about what is actually going on for you, what is going on in your body, what is going on in your thinking. And number two, you'll be able to connect with God. That solitude is going to build a relationship between your spirituality and your humanity. Solitude is going to close the gap between your humanity and your spirituality. Your spirituality, your higher self is not out there in the clouds. It's already inside of you. You've just got to get quiet enough to be able to hear it. And when you do, you know, it might be difficult. It's going to be difficult. I struggle with solitude sometimes, especially when I'm in pain. It's hard for me to get quiet because I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel stuff sometimes. I want to distract myself. If I distract myself, maybe the pain will go away. Well, it doesn't. The pain does not go away, you know. Is there any, somebody else who's just joined actually? Hi, Pammy, how you doing? I didn't see your comment when you came in. Does anybody else who's on this broadcast struggle with solitude and silence and being quiet? You know, raise your hand if you struggle with it. You know, quite often when we have a lot of trauma, when we have a lot of pain, we don't want to get quiet because we don't want to feel it. We're too busy. Oh, I need to do this and I need to do that. Oh, let me take care of this person. Let me take care of that person. You want to take care of everybody else so that you can avoid the quiet. Because you know, if you get quiet, you might hear stuff about yourself that you don't want to hear. You and God is going to have a conversation that maybe you don't want to hear. There's things that you're going to have to face. There's things that you're going to have to take responsibility for, to look at within yourself that you don't want to look at. And as far as, you know, racial sobriety goes and the whole thing around racial stress, you know, we've been taught to numb ourselves, to ignore how we feel as human beings. We've kind of learned how to objectify our bodies because that's how we've been taught from the slave plantations right down to here. We've become mules. We've become mules, and so we don't know how to connect with ourselves because there's so much stuff that's going on. We've just learned, oh, we just need to get on with it. Just get on with it. Don't feel anything. Come out your feelings. Come out your feelings. Just get on with it. That's what we've been taught, and it's hurting us. It's hurting us. So the first thing that we have to do is find a space, a safe space, 30 minutes a day, to be able to reconnect to who we are, to reconnect to ourselves. And that has to be a daily commitment. It has to be a daily commitment. The second thing that I advise people to do, I tell people this all the time, is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, and when I talk about self-knowledge, I'm not talking about pyramids. I'm talking about emotional intelligence. I'm talking about understanding who you are as a human being, understanding your response to things. Everybody reacts to things differently. Everybody responds to things differently. And when it comes to racial sobriety, everybody manages their pain differently. Some people will go and eat. Some people will go in the gym. Some people will go and have a drink. Some people will go and smoke spliff. Some people will go and get another man. Multiple serial relationships. They keep going from bed to bed to bed to bed to bed to bed to bed because they think that the next penis, the next penis is gonna numb their pain, and it don't. It might do for half an hour. It might solve the problem. It might make them feel nice for half an hour, but when that person's gone, the pain is still going to be there. The pain is still going to be there. So everybody manages their pain differently. And what racial sobriety does is it helps people to understand their patterns, understand how they manage pain. And I've spoken to so many black people that are in recovery that they're beginning to really understand that the pain around living under the system of racism is actually underneath all of their acting out, whether it's food or whatever it is. The pain of this stuff, the fact that it is constant, is what's underneath the acting out, because they feel powerless over it, and it's so aggressive and it's constant. It doesn't stop. And so, people find it hard to stay sober because it is ongoing, and they don't, first of all, they don't always understand that it's that. They might think it's something else, but they don't always understand that. It's only when they really start to do the racial sobriety work, they really start to understand that actually it's, the root of all of this, my acting out, my addiction is in response to racism. It's in response to racism. I've had people inbox me, message me about who've been in recovery for years. They've been in recovery for years and they can't stay sober. And they hear the stuff that I've been talking about and they're like, oh my, this makes so much sense. This is why I can't stay sober. Because I'm in pain around this stuff. And because it's hard to talk about this stuff in the recovery rooms, there isn't the space for a lot of people to talk about this racial sobriety stuff in recovery, that they don't understand that that's at the core of it. They don't understand that that's at the core of it. So, the self-knowledge, the understanding who you are as a human being, but also understanding the cultural stuff, the cultural pain, the racial pain, the ancestral pain, the current pain, the stuff that's gone on within your family, the stuff that's going on socially, and the ancestral stuff. A combination of all of that, that's a lot to take on. That's a lot to take on if you're not in recovery, if you don't have a support network. And this is the third thing that I always tell people: you cannot do this alone. You can't do this alone. You need a support network to be able to do this. The fact that it is going on at so many different angles that it is, you really do need a support network. And you need, step one in recovery is, I admit that I'm powerless over ... But I always say to people that step one for racial sobriety is, I admit that I'm powerless over racism, white supremacy, but I have the power to choose how I respond. You have the power to choose how you respond to it. You can't control how white people behave. There's so many people black people that spend so much energy begging white people to stop killing us, begging white people to change. Look, we are human beings. Please, can you stop being mean to us? They ain't gonna stop. They ain't gonna stop, because it's a sickness in of itself. It's an addiction to power. Racism, white supremacy is an addiction to power. And if you understand, Neely Fuller's work and Dr. Wilson's work, it's about white genetic annihilation. It's about the fear of white genetic annihilation. And the blacker you are, the darker you are, the more of a threat you are to white supremacy. Because Dr. Wilson's work talks about the whole thing about being, black people being genetically dominant, as in using Barack Obama's a black man, but yet he's from a mixed, but his mum's white. So to put that into context, the psychology behind racism is that the blacker the person, the more they are a threat to white people becoming extinct. So therefore, they act out that fear and this is why black people in particular, African people in particular, get the heat. That's why we get so much heat. Because it's the psychology of racism, of the system of racism, is about, we have to destroy these people because they're going to destroy us. And the thing is as well, there's been recent articles that have come out around the fact that white people, European people are, or actually I think it's just in America actually, this particular piece that I wrote, is about the fact that people who live in the US, white people, they're dying quicker than they are having babies. So within a few generations, white people could be extinct. And so that's the reason why we're seeing, white supremacy more and more violent. They're more and more violent because they're acting out. They're acting out that fear, that terror of becoming extinct. It's about survival. So it's not about begging white people to change, or begging them to kind of see us as human beings, because, people that choose to practice white supremacy, they're in fear. Okay, it's an addiction to power. It's a fear-based addiction it's a shame-based addiction to power. That's what racism, white supremacy is. That's the irony of it, is they spend their time trying to shame black people for our melanin, but actually it's a projection of white shame. A projection is somebody that cannot cope with their own feelings of self-hate, so they project that, they vomit that stuff onto other people. That's essentially what racism is. White self-hate vomited onto the people that they feel most threatened by, i.e. black people. That's what this is about. So you need a support system to be able to deal with this. You need a support system, and not just any support system. You need a sober support system. Now, what do I mean by sober? You need to be around people that are, number one, doing the work, that understand this stuff and that are doing the work. Because there's a lot of us that are, finding it difficult because we're with family members or people that just don't understand this stuff, or that don't want to talk about this stuff, or can't talk about it because they're in so much of their own pain. I hear that a lot as well. And that actually, that feeds the racial stress. It feeds more racial stress when people can't talk about it, especially within their families. It's more it's like another trauma. So you can't talk about it, externally, because one of the white supremacy codes is that you're not allowed to talk about racism. Especially, you can't talk about it with white people. That's part of the oppressive nature of the system, that you're not allowed to talk about it. And then this happens also in our families, that we can't talk about it because it triggers the pain in other people. If you're not doing the work, it triggers the pain in them. So they shut each other down. And that's where this thing comes from about, oh no, you're too emotional. Stuff. Black people are not allowed to be emotional. We have every right to be emotional. We've got shit going on. We've got stuff going on. But it's about finding a safe place. We don't know how much we're hurting until we find a safe place to feel. We need to find a safe place to feel. That's what we really need, a safe place to feel, And it starts with you setting that time for yourself, 30 minutes, You know, stop going externally for the minute. Go internally. Internally, you need to find that safe space for yourself. When you first commit to that safe space for yourself, that 30 minutes a day, the other stuff will happen. You'll be surprised what will happen when you start taking care of yourself first. The first is, you know, it's easy to want to run to kind of want other people, but sometimes, again, we've got to find the people that are going to support you, that are going to be able to listen, that have got the listening, that are maybe a few steps down the road from you, that can help you to walk through this. That's why I do the work that I do, because I understand what it feels like to go to people that just aren't emotionally available. They're just not available to hear me, to hear you, to hear your pain. They're the people that we desperately want to hear us, but they can't. They can't, because they've got their own stuff going on. So it's important to first start with, you know, to have your own stuff, to have your own space, your own 30 minutes, so you can really start to do that. Now, one of the things that I've actually created as part of this series as well is a really simple 5-day reset experience exactly for this process. If you're stuck, maybe you've been on your healing journey for a while, and you've kind of fallen off the wagon around your self-care, and you just need somebody to hold your hand through this process, just for the next 5 days, to kind of give you an injection of empowerment, you know, to some support, so you can really start to feel it again. So it's called it's the 5-day reset 5-day reset experience, and you can get it at reset. Hang on, if I got the right. Yeah, sorry about that. The link for that, if you go to reset.juneallen.net, and you'll find the link there. It's basically a 5-day experience. You do get access to a private Facebook group as well as you go through the process, so you get more support. You can ask questions. You can connect with me at a more one-on-one level. Obviously, there's so much that I can teach you on this you know, on these lives, but really it's important for you to if you really want to do this work and start to really pick up, this is a really simple way to get your foot in the door. We can communicate a lot more in the Facebook group. You can tell me what's going on and stuff like that. If you do want to dive a bit deeper and you want to schedule a call with me, you can go to callme.juneallen.net. You know, I've been in recovery for 8 years, and yeah, I'm willing to listen. You know, I can listen to you. I can share my experience, strength and hope with you at a more personal level. I can share tools. Sometimes it's not even about me sharing tools. Sometimes it's just about me sitting and listening to people because they just haven't been heard. A space to feel, just to give you a platform to be able to feel what's going on for you. Sometimes that's all you need, is somebody to just listen, you know, so it is really important. There is one other option actually I have for you, and you know, if you can't afford to have, you know, the one-on-one sessions with me, I have got another like a self-paced training that you can have as well, and it's all about reclaiming your blackness. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there around, you know, how to deal with racial stress. I share a really simple 3-step system that you can use on a daily basis to reduce racial stress. It's about, you know, you've got to learn how to discharge your emotions, then you've got to learn to reflect on what's happened, and then you've got to learn how to nurture yourself. Now, in this other training, I walk you through all of that. There's 30 tools in there as well, where the different ways that you can use those things to kind of discharge, reflection, nurture. That's the 3 steps, and there's 30 tools in relation to those 3 steps to help you discharge and get rid of your racial stress and everything. There's also you know, my own personal story in there, my own personal schedule as well of what I do on a daily basis to get rid of my racial stress. So there's a lot of stuff in there. If you'd actually like the first audio from that program, if you go to callme.juneallen.net, there is actually a pre-clarity call experience in there, and actually I do put that in there as an extra bonus. You get the first audio for free, so you can experience that a little bit for free and see if you like it. If you like it, then you can obviously purchase the full training. So there's some options there for you, you know, around what you can do in terms, you know, racial sobriety is and working the steps and being in recovery is an amazing platform for you to really just to be able to not just discharge your pain, but you'll be able to understand your pain, understand your acting out patterns, understand why you do the things you do. And one of the things I also love about being in recovery is because you get the opportunity to separate what is yours and what belongs to other people. You know, one of the most difficult things about racial stress and racial trauma is that, you know, it erodes at your sense of self. It erodes at your sense of your self-esteem. And so what happens as a result of that is that your worth becomes externalized. You know, whiteness becomes the, you know, the aspiration. Whiteness becomes the aspiration because we don't have any sense of self. It constantly, you know, because the racial stress is ongoing, it constantly chips away at our self-esteem all the time. And that's really painful, and it creates a lot of shame. You know, shame is, I'm going to do a separate training on shame at some point, because, you know, black shame is probably the most toxic thing that you know, that allows us to remain being controlled by white supremacy, because we're constantly being shamed for who we are, you know. So it's important to have that support network in recovery, because we need that to be able to unpick these things and understand all the different aspects of racial stress. And shame is a huge part of it, you know, because then what happens is, if you've got shame, then what happens, you know, around that is that you're constantly in fear of being shamed. You know, you're constantly in fear of being triggered, you know, going into a shame spiral. You know, it's like, how many times have you been in situations where you avoid doing something, you know, because you don't want that person or that thing to kind of make you feel shame? So you're not just feeling shame, but then you're, you know, there's a thing around, you don't want somebody to trigger that shame because you haven't dealt with it. And if you're not dealing with it, like actively crushing the shame, it's so toxic. It's so toxic, and it is going to bleed in other areas of your life. That's the thing about racial stress. It's going to bleed into your life, and that's not what you don't want, because it's going to impact how you love. It's going to impact how you parent. It's going to impact how you show up in your business if you're an entrepreneur. It's going to impact how you show up in the world. And so it's going to impact how you talk to yourself, because you're going to be constantly being mean to yourself. If you feel black shame, you're going to be constantly beating up on yourself, you know. And healing requires compassion. Healing requires us to be able to understand that's a pattern. You know, I suffered with all of these, everything that I'm talking to you about today. I suffered with these things. That's why, you know, racial sobriety is so freaking awesome. Racial sobriety is so awesome because you can understand, number one, you accept yourself as a human being, and number two, you understand your own humanity. I'm not perfect. I'm not some, you know, sobriety perfect guru, anything like that. I'm far from perfect. I'm far from serene and all the rest of it. But the difference is, I understand why I behave the way I behave, and I've got tools. I've got tools to be able to turn that stuff around, and I have a support network to remind me that I'm not going crazy. I have a support network of people that will tell me, actually, June, you're just being human. That's a survival, you know, they'll tell me, you know, you're just in survival mode. You're just doing survival mode. You just need to turn yourself around and just go back over here where the tools are, where the sobriety is. Go to a meeting, pick up the phone, call someone, do some journaling, you know, do some meditation, do some prayer, get into solitude. All of those things that I've just been talking to about earlier. That's the power of racial sobriety, and the power of having an amazing support system, is that you've got people who look like you, and that is really important. You've got people that look like you who can tell you that you're not crazy. And the most important thing about that is that you're not alone. The thing about having an amazing support system that allows you to stand in your humanity is that you know that you're not alone. And so many of us black people out here are alone. We're isolated. This Black Women's event that I did a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the things that kept coming up. The fact that they felt so isolated inside their pain. And racial stress creates isolation. And that, you know, the way that white supremacy acts itself out, that isolation is actually, it works for the system. Because if we're isolated, we're not talking to each other. If we're in shame, we're not talking to each other. If we're in pain, we're not going to empathize with each other. We can't bond with each other in a human if we've got all this pain and trauma going on. So we have to find ways to deal with our stress, to understand the stress, to be compassionate with the fact that we're going through all of this stuff. You know, we have, you know, Black people are emotional because there's not enough of us doing this healing work. There's not enough of us doing this healing work, or we don't understand how to do it. You know, it's so freaking awesome when you start doing the work. It really is. It's so awesome when you start doing the work and you start connecting with other people doing the work. Don't get me wrong, it's hard. It is hard. But it's worth it when you find other people that are doing the same thing and that are getting results. Even if you've got depression, even if you've got, you know, low self-esteem, there is a solution. If you're feeling stressed, there is a solution. I found that solution in the recovery rooms, and, you know, I have created this platform because there was nothing in the recovery rooms that was specific to racial sobriety. One of the things that's very different, I found, with Black people in recovery and you know, white people in recovery, and I'm generalizing here, so, you know, obviously take what you like and leave the rest. But when we're talking about from a general perspective, you know, I see a lot of white people going in the rooms. What they would do, they would come in, you know, they might have difficult history or difficult situation that they need to deal with, and then what they do is they come in, they go through their history, their childhood or whatever, they kind of process a lot of that, process whatever's going on for them currently or whatever. Happy as Larry, they just go about their business, and they might dip in and out of the rooms, do service, and, you know, just for maintenance. If they've got stuff going on, they just come back in and they just deal with it, and then they come out. You know, that's kind of generally how it works for white people. But for us, it's very different because we're still being oppressed. We're still being abused. We're still being abused. We're being abused socially. We're being abused within families that are still recycling the pain within the family. So we're still having to deal with that. And then on top of that, we're having to deal with racism inside the rooms as well. You know, yesterday I did the topic was about racism in the recovery rooms. We're having to deal with that as well. So that is really, really hard for us as people of color to be. That's a lot of stuff to deal with. Our experience of, you know, sobriety is not as cut and dried. I mean, you know, addiction and recovery is not that black and white anyway, to be honest. But it's just another layer of racial stress that we have to deal with. Even when we're trying to get well, the places that we're trying to get well, we have to deal with racism. And it could be in the recovery rooms. It can be, you know, with having a white therapist. You know, these are all things because they don't, you know, even with white therapists, they might tick a box to say, oh yeah, we've done a little bit about, you know, culture and whatever, but they don't go deep into it like the stuff that I'm talking about. They don't. So they don't really understand it. They don't really understand it, you know, and this is why, you know, there are platforms in place now. You know, in the UK, there's the Black and Asian Therapist, BAATN. I'll put a link in the show notes. Black and Asian Therapist Network in the UK, amazing platform. And, you know, not only have they, you know, they're all sort of trained, qualified, certified therapists, but they also do, you know, they do a lot of this work specifically around, you know, the communities, people of color communities, and they're doing an amazing job with that stuff. You know, I've got so much support and stuff from that. I mean, I found my therapist on there, you know. So, you know, I will have another excuse me, I'll do another broadcast another time about, you know, how awesome it is to have a, you know, a black therapist or a black mentor or whatever. But it's so important to have that support network. And I have, you know, all of the people that I have in my tribe now that support me, you know, they're all black people. And I've just, you know, sometimes I feel overwhelmed. Like, I have some awesome people in my circle. I was saying this to my therapist on Monday. I have some awesome people in my but I cherry pick them. I cherry pick them. Sometimes I haven't checked. Sometimes they're people that have just come into my life, you know. But, you know, I have a recovery sponsor that is just slamming. She's amazing. You know, I've got a new sponsor as well in another fellowship that is amazing. And me and they worked together, you know, on and off for a while. We supported each other. And, you know, she's now becoming my, you know, we're going to co-sponsor each other in another fellowship, which is amazing. I've got my therapist there. I've got my business coach. Oh, my God. Like, when you are ready to do the work, the slamming black people are going to show up in your life. Trust and believe that. When your higher power's got a job for you to do, he's going to give you the people that's going to help you do that task. And trust me, I kicked and screamed about doing this work for years. I kicked and screamed about doing this work for years because I just thought I don't want to deal with black people. I was so traumatized about the stuff that was going on in my own family. Like, I just thought, I cannot get close to black people. I can't do it. But every time I tried to run away from it, my higher power's like, I don't know what you're going over there for, because this is what your mission is. This is what your mission is. And what's happened over the years is that my higher power has put people in place, so I've run out of excuses. I can't say, oh, it's because I haven't got any support in that area. I haven't got any support over this side. Oh, I can't do it over here because I haven't got any support over this. My higher powers now, and what? Now what's your excuse? You got slamming therapists, you got slamming sponsors, you got slamming business coach. What's your excuse now? I ain't got no excuse. I have got no excuse. There comes a point where you just have to surrender to doing the work. You got to surrender to doing the work. But you know what? I wouldn't change anything. Sometimes it is hard, but I would not change anything, because now my support network is in place. Now it's up to me to actually put the gauntlet down and actually do the work. And this is why I'm doing the work. This is why I'm doing the work, you know, because I now have a support system in place. And now I've just got to trust my ancestors. I've got to trust my higher power. I've got to trust the ability that I can do this. And I have to trust that I'm not doing this as a human being, June Allen sitting in the chair. Listen, before I come on the board, before I press live, I do the step 3 prayer. I do the step 3 prayer before I come on and talk to anybody, because if it was me, human being, I'd be too scared to do it. I'd be too scared to do it. But I've got my business coach whispering in the back of me. I've got my therapist in the back of me saying this. I've got my sponsors in, you know, I've got all these amazing people that I've got in my life. I've got them supporting me to do this. And then at the end of the day, it's me and God. When I come and sit down and I put the microphone on and I press live, I say, God, just help me say what I need to say. Because it's not about me. It's beyond me. And it's the same for you. It's the same for anybody else that's doing this work. When you start doing this work, yes, you need support. Yes, you need to get well. But then it becomes about legacy. It becomes about what responsibility have you taken to lay the foundations for the people that are going to go before you. Whether you've got children or not, you know, we have a responsibility to make the path, a little bit clearer for those that are coming in front of us. You know, even with everything that went on with my parents, you know, how painful it was. My parents laid the gauntlet by getting on a boat from Jamaica, saving up the 2 shekels what they had from Jamaica, and came over to this country. That is how they passed the baton. They did the best for where they came, for who, you know, where they were. You know, my great grandmother was the daughter of a slave. My great grandmother was the daughter of a slave. So my family is still carrying a lot of that stuff. I'm the first generation in my family to do this work, because I made the decision that the buck stops with me. I'm not passing on that stuff to my daughter. I am not passing on that stuff to my daughter, and I am teaching my daughter about racial stress. I might not say it the way that I say it to you as adults, but I pass that stuff on to her because she needs to understand white supremacy, point blank, period. She needs to understand it. She needs to understand it. It's my responsibility as a black woman, as a mother, to be able to understand it externally. She needs to understand it. She needs to understand it internally, because not every black person is doing this work. She's got to understand that there are a lot of black people out there that are in pain, and they are going to act out. They're going to act crazy because they're in pain. Because that's ultimately what it is. When black people act crazy, when they do all this stuff, it's because we're in pain. It's unresolved. You cannot have 300 years of slavery and Jim Crow and all the stuff that we're experiencing even up till now, and without therapy. You know, raise your hand if any of your ancestors from the plantations went to therapy. I'll wait. None of our ancestors went to therapy. So if none of our ancestors went to therapy, where do you think all that 300 years of beating and rape, where do you think all that's gone? That's why black people act crazy now, because they're in pain. And a lot of times they don't even know they're in pain. They're just acting it out. They think it's stuff that happened last week. But a lot of that stuff is ancestral. That's why racial sobriety is so freaking awesome. Because you get to understand this stuff. You get to understand the layers. You understand the layers and how it impacts you as a person, how your ancestors went through this stuff. You get to understand and process it from an ancestral perspective, and you get to understand it as well from an internal perspective. And then you get to make a choice about what you're going to do with it. It's not just about understanding it. You got to make a choice about what you're going to do. Number one, in your own life, and then what you're going to do for the legacy. What you're going to do to pass it on to your children. What steps are you going to take? It's not about just reading and all that. It's about what are you actually going to do? You know? So the last thing that I wanted to share with you, so I went a bit of a tangent there. The last thing I wanted to share with you is the most important part of learning how to heal from this stuff when the trauma is ongoing is boundaries. I cannot say that's enough. Boundaries, 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 boundaries. That is the only way that we are going to heal while this trauma is ongoing. Now, when I talk about boundaries, okay, just to define what a boundary is what works for you. That's simple. I saw something on social media today, which was so amazing. I had to take a picture of it, and I thought I'm going to share that in the broadcast today. Let me just get it up for you. Okay, where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so basically the post said, what do boundaries feel like? Yeah, so it says what boundaries are. It is not my job to fix others. It's okay if others get angry. It's okay to say no. It is not my job to take responsibility for others. I don't have to anticipate the needs of others. It is not my job to make, it is my job to make me happy. Nobody has to agree with me. I have the right to my own feelings, and I am enough. That is what boundaries feel like. Now, the reason why so many of us have got weak boundaries is that is part of the white supremacy system. That is part of the process. The only reason why black people have been so vulnerable to being abused, both externally and internally, is because we don't have any boundaries. We've not been taught boundaries. And that, you know, the reason why setting boundaries is hard is because it's difficult to set boundaries when you're in pain. When you're in pain, you're going to do whatever you have to do to try and to stop the pain. You're going to do whatever you think that you need to do to avoid the pain. So if somebody else is if you're in pain already, and somebody else is getting angry, you're just going to abandon your own needs just to stop that person being angry. You know, so boundaries is about saying no to other people so you can say yes to yourself. So when we're talking about solitude, when we're talking about self-knowledge, when we're talking about support, which are the three things, solutions that I said, you cannot do any of those things without boundaries. You've got to be able to set those boundaries for yourself and say, actually, you know, I have to protect my time. I have to protect my time. And in the training that I talked about earlier, the 5-day reset experience, the 5-day reset experience, that is what, you know, the underpinning of that is about helping you to set some boundaries, some really soft, gentle boundaries with yourself to start that process off. That is the crux of healing, is boundaries. I did actually do, I have another empowerment training actually that I did earlier on this year, which was in relation to the series that I did on abusive Black mothers. And I talked a lot about boundaries in there, being able, you know, setting boundaries around people within your family, setting internal boundaries. You know, if you find it hard to stop yourself from behaving a certain way, from doing a certain thing, it talks about that as well. So it talks about external boundaries and it talks about internal boundaries. This is really, really important. If you're interested in that training, you can go to boundaries.juneallen.net. But yeah, boundaries are so important. Boundaries are the crux of healing. You know, if you don't have boundaries, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to not be stressed, you know. So yeah, just, so they're the three things. So you've got to, you know, solitude, really important, you know, because when you have that space to feel, the space to understand what's going on for you, then you're going to be able to make choices from that place. Once you understand what's going on for you, then you can make different choices. Second one, self-knowledge. It's not about pyramids, it's about emotional intelligence, getting to know yourself, how you react to things. And then the third one is support, you know. So I do talk about a lot of this stuff as well in the superpowers guide as well. Solitude is one of the things in there, self-knowledge is in there. You know, I talk about culture and community support as well. So go to superpowers.juneallen.net. So that's it for today. That's today's class. If you've got any questions or whatever, you can email me, info@yardofgreatness.com. If you would like to have a one-to-one session with me, go to callme.juneallen.net. If you found this useful, if you know somebody else who might be interested in this, you can go to, just share it with a friend. And yeah, that's it for today. So yeah, that's June Allen signing off with another broadcast. So I will see you tomorrow. Again, not sure what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, but keep your eyes peeled. Like the page, or you can sign up to my website. Actually, if you get the Superpowers book, then you're automatically going to get on the email list anyway. So you get all the information about what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow and stuff like that. So have a wonderful day, and I will catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye. Bye.